All right.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the virtual small business forum presented by the West Hartford Chamber of Commerce in the town of West Hartford. My name is Chris Conway and I am the Executive Director of the West Hartford Chamber. Today for our small business forum, we were able to gather the representatives that represent West Hartford at the state level. Senator Derek Slapp, Representative Jillian Gilchrist, and Representative Tammy Exum. As this is a joint effort with the town of West Hartford, I would like to just introduce the town's economic development specialist, Kristen Gorski.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much to the Chamber for continuing to be such a great partner in supporting our business community, and thank you so much to our state delegation for taking time today to meet with our businesses. We're really excited to bring you this fourth installment, and we hope to continue this partnership for months to come. So thank you very much, and I would like to introduce our Mayor Sherry Cantor, who would like to say a couple words.
Hi, thank you all. Thank you to Kristen for her tireless work to support our business community, for Chris Conway for his leadership and the commitment he's made to all of the businesses in West Hartford, expanding his membership to everybody and resources. This is really important time to provide the support, the guidance, the advice. There was a lot of information coming at us. I have been thrilled to be a part of, I think, all of the forums, and they've been very informative and very appreciated, sincerely appreciated by the business community, and that is nonprofits and profit businesses as well. Thank you to our delegation. So much work is ahead of all of us, and you've been great. You've been great helping us all navigate these unprecedented times, and I really appreciate your tireless work as well with our constituents. And it will take team effort to navigate all of our way on the other side of this, and as we all continue to recover. And we respond and recover. That's that's going to be the theme. So again, thank you all. I can only stay on for a few minutes. I have to jump on a UConn Board of Trustees meeting. But again, thank you all for being here, for networking, for supporting each other. Be well, be safe, wear face coverings.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. I would now like to introduce our moderator today, Chuck Corsi of Corsi and Company. Chuck, it's on you now.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you to all who have joined, and especially thanks to our panelists from the state legislature. My name is Chuck Corsi. I'm a board member of the Chamber and also chair of the Economic Development Committee. And again, I appreciate you all being here. The purpose of today's meeting is to give you, Chamber members and members of our business community, an opportunity to share with our representatives in the legislature what you have been experiencing over the last 4 months and where you may need help. We would also encourage you to ask any other questions of our legislators. After very brief introductions by our delegation members, I'll be asking the participants, folks in the business community, to ask your questions. We're going to ask, and when you ask your questions, if it's directed at a specific legislator, please let us know, or if it's open to the entire group. We're going to ask folks, our delegation, to limit their answers to 3 to 5 minutes. And we'll go on from there. So with that, we will hear just a brief introductions from each member. Tammy, would you like to go first?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, good morning. And thank you so much for this opportunity to join you. I am really interested in hearing what the businesses here have been experiencing, and getting your feedback and your input as we go forward, because I agree with Mayor Cantor, it's about respond and recover. I think that's a really good motto. So I want to just tell you a little bit about myself. I don't know who on this call is familiar with me or not. Just to briefly give you a recap, I joined through a special election in April of 2019. I went in and hit the ground running because all the committee work was done, the hearings were done, and I kind of started voting right away. So I was really looking forward to 2020 and having the opportunity to have my first full session. And as you know, about a month in, that all changed. And I think the Chamber was one of the organizations that we actually were able to meet with prior to everything shutting down. I had a visit there at the Capitol. But I'm glad we had that opportunity, but things have really changed as you know. I was asked what I was working on and what I hope to do. So I was working on one thing I was really excited about was the Living Donor Protection Act. Derek Slapp and I were working on this really together. He had constituents before the election that he later introduced me to because I have a connection around kidney disease. My mother died of renal failure, and we were looking for an opportunity to protect donors who were being penalized, could be through insurance by now having a pre-existing condition for donating organs. That had wonderful support. I was really looking forward to it making it to the floor, and of course that has stopped, but when we go back, that is something I'd like to resume. I serve on the GAE, Government Administration and Elections Committees, Environment and Banking. The GAE committee is very relevant as we discuss elections and absentee ballots. When we go back into the special session, which I understand as of last night, I received an email that we will be going in next week. That is one of the things that we will be discussing, the legislation around absentee, mail-in voting for the November election, along with police accountability and transparency and two other areas that are going to be covered. I think, and I'm looking forward in the future to more work with economic development, but I have to say, this period of time has been one in which we have all worked tirelessly with constituents. There have been so many different issues that have come our way, from sole proprietors to people who needed connections with unemployment insurance, so many questions around education, police accountability and transparency. And I'm active in several caucuses, including the Women's Caucus, where I work on the Education Committee and education related issues, and also the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, where we work on a lot of the equity issues. And finally, one of my areas of passion, in addition to going back and working with education, my background's in education, I helped to start the special education PTO here in West Hartford, is to also look for workplace opportunities for people with disabilities. I would like to be very active in that type of work, in addition to looking at election laws and looking at economic development opportunities. So thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thank you, Tammy. Jillian?
Great, thank you so much for having me this morning. And I echo what my good colleague, Representative Exum said. I'm really interested to hear from all of you and see how we can help support the business community from the state level. But to share kind of what I've been up to since March, since the day the world changed, it really has turned into quite a bit of constituent work. And what that looks like is responding to individuals' concerns, recommending things to the governor's office for executive orders, and making recommendations to my leadership in the House for things that could be included in a potential proposal. We're looking at September. As Tammy said, we will be going in next week for a special session, but we are probably going back in September to do a COVID-related response bill. The issues really have been varied. And so from the start of this, folks would reach out talking about the need for telehealth, and we've seen that play out, and that's actually been quite a success. And I'm hoping that telehealth continues beyond the pandemic. Folks reached out talking about needing to stop evictions and get rental support. And we've seen that those issues have been addressed, can be addressed more, but there has been, we have done stuff in the state. Someone reached out about business account maintenance fees, and were we able to delay those? The tax deadline being expanded, the unopened beer, wine at pickup. So a variety of things came through to us as legislators, and then we would make recommendations up to the governor's office. And so I also, that's making me think about what the mayor said. It really is a partnership, and it's about responding and recovery and responding and recovery. And so our role as your state representative is to hear from you and then to take what you say and make those recommendations. Right now, I'm really focused on the PUA and self-employed individuals who have also had employment. I'm calling it, and others are calling it, the hustle. So folks who wanted to have that small business in our community, but in order to do so, had to also work maybe a shift waitressing or teach a class at a school. Well, because they were eligible for unemployment through the state, they have been denied the PUA. And so I've been having many conversations to figure out what the issue is, and we are likely having a conversation with our federal delegation next week, because if you aren't aware, the PUA does run out at the end of this month. And so just want to figure out, how can we help these people? This is a huge population who works hard and needs our support. I serve on 3 committees. I serve on the Appropriations Committee, the Energy and Technology Committee, and the Education Committee. The Appropriations Committee has started meeting again, which is fantastic, not in person. We're doing Zooms as well. It's probably going on 3 or 4 weeks now. And so we've been having informational hearings with various state agencies to understand what funding they've gotten through the federal government, and then also what are the needs going to be. And so we are all in this for the long haul. There is a great deal of need, and I think, unfortunately, it's going to get worse before it gets better. From the start of this, I started reaching out to families who have children with special needs, K through 12. And so I've had a standing meeting every Monday, again, a Zoom, to hear from those families to understand how we can support them in the distance learning. I also chair a work group for the Women and Children Subcommittee of MAPOC, which is our Medicaid oversight board in the state. And so the work group is prenatal, maternity, and well baby care during COVID-19. And so we meet weekly as well to understand how we can support that population. And then I'll just finish with this Thursday, for anyone interested, I'm partnering with a colleague of mine, Representative Palm, on an informational town hall, virtual town hall, to discuss the reopening plan for the schools, because I know that's on a lot of people's minds, teachers' minds, students' minds, parents' minds. So thank you again for having me.
Thanks, Jillian. And finally, my fellow Yankee fan, Derek Slapp. Derek, you're on mute.
I thought okay. Let me just.
There we go.
Good now?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, I just want to begin, Chuck, by saying that even though I have Yankee Stadium behind me, I'm here to help all baseball fans and all businesses, whether you're a Red Sox fan or even a Mets fan too, even Mets. Anyway, thrilled to be here, and I wanted to thank the chamber and Chris, Chuck, and Kirsten, everyone really. Your involvement in helping to pull this together has been great, and I think the more of this we can do, the better. So thanks for doing this. I'll be brief because I know we're already getting some questions in too. So I want to obviously make sure there's plenty of time for folks to have questions. I am just finishing up first term in the state senate. As many of you know, Beth Bai was there for a good number of years beforehand, and then she became commissioner of early childhood education. So there was a special election, and so this is just the first term. So kind of jumped right into the middle of the process about a year or so ago, and was named chair of the Aging Committee. I'm also vice chair of Human Services, and then I'm on the Commerce Committee and Higher Education as well. So I think in terms of business community, there's a lot of overlap there between the committees that I'm on and things that may be of interest to you. I don't want to kind of really just repeat a lot of the same things that my great colleagues Tammy and Jillian have said, but I will touch on just in terms of a huge focus of what I know we've all been really working on is constituent services and helping people with access, benefits, and assistance. And I had a call, the Senate Democratic Caucus had a call with the DOL, the Department of Labor, as you all know, and the Deputy Commissioner yesterday, and trying to get them to improve their communication process which has been really frustrating for constituents, and then for all of us too. So that's just taken an enormous amount of time. So I'll just kind of break up my comments, I guess, into three pieces. Like, one, things that I've been focused on, like, since March, right, up till now. Special session, which was alluded to, that will begin next week. And then September, I kind of grouped that into the special session bucket as well. And then January. So DOL claims, in terms of like what's been going on for the last 4 months, it's been DOL claims, and then working on, Jillian touched on this, where we advocate to the governor's office to help push executive orders. So some that I've been working on is to help visitation for folks who are in nursing homes, who have been really isolated. And we want to make sure that they have a right, a guarantee to be connected virtually with their loved ones, which is great for them, of course, and it's good for folks who have loved ones in nursing homes, who've been successful in getting an executive order on that. That's kind of one example. And then working on the special session legislation, really trying to make it as robust as possible to address issues of equity and systemic racism, that kind of thing, that we've been really focused on that. For September, it was touched on that we're looking at some COVID-related legislation. There's been a lot of talk about the Unemployment Trust Fund. I know some of you may have concerns about that, and about making sure, just one example of something I think that we need to do is addressing the issue of having the employer's rate adjusted. Essentially, the Lamont administration froze that right during the pandemic, and that's going to expire. So I think that's something that we need to look at to try to see where we can help small businesses. And then we're going to be hopefully looking at some housing reforms as well. And then I'll just kind of wrap up, be going beyond that in January. The state budget is something you all may be very concerned about. I'm concerned about it because, we were prior to this, had, $2.6 billion in the rainy day fund. Our credit rating was doing well, had just been upgraded. Moody's, or was it Forbes, I think, ranked us as one of the top 7 states in the country that's prepared for this. So we were starting to really get our fiscal house in order. And now we're going to have a lot of challenges. So we need to come up with an affordable, sustainable budget. And I want to continue my working relationship with the business community. As chair of the aging committee, I proposed and got passed out of that committee unanimously a bill to really help tackle age discrimination. And that was something that I worked with CBIA and was very pleased to have their endorsement and support. And they actually came and testified for the bill. So I think that that's when legislation is at its best, is when we're all working together and listening to each other. So I'll just leave it there and really look forward to all of your questions. And thanks again, Chuck, for moderating.
Thank you, Derek. And thank you, Tammy and Jillian. We have a question from SDSS Martial Arts to all the panelists. Most of the small businesses are not able to get back on our feet. Almost all shops are not even able to pay rent. How can we get the fears down and people back into our shops? Also, for the chamber, how can the chamber protect the small businesses from landlords trying to evict? Only mix it up a bit. Derek, do you want to take that first? You hold on a second, Derek.
Okay.
You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. So I know the second part of that question was for the chamber, but I guess let me address kind of the first part in terms of helping to restore business confidence, right? And that people going into shops. And I think that this is what I'm about to say is like relatively good news, but still bad news, is that Connecticut's economy, I think it was shrank 4.6% since the pandemic, which is bad, of course. It's better than, I think, any other state in New England. It's one of the better rates. So I think in part, we've been doing better because of the precautions that we've taken as a state, where we don't see the surges now coming in from Texas and Florida and other states. So I think being vigilant is not only best for public health, but it's actually best for the business community as well, because we're able to turn the corner and, hopefully we won't see a resurgence. And, Jillian touched on a very important topic about school and what are we going to do with school and how does that fit into this? Because I know people have a lot of concerns. in terms of could that make things worse? And, you know, we could have a whole nother conversation about school. But I guess my point is that I think we do need to continue to be vigilant about wearing masks and about social distancing, because that is going to not only be best for public health, but also help get us back on our feet economically. And then there is a role, I think, that government can play, local government and state government as well. So, you know, I'm very focused and interested in trying to create an art stabilization fund. Chuck and I actually spoke with that offline a couple days ago. Things where there are holes or gaps in assistance from the federal government, I think the state government, we need to be nimble and to be able to pick up the ball and move it. So, you know, I hope that helps kind of address some of that. And
Sure.
we don't have all the answers, right? We're kind of trying to figure this out as we go. But I know the chamber plays an important role, and I know the second half of that was probably for the chamber, right, as well, in terms of what role you all can play.
Right. Well, I also, just to follow up on that, Derek, I believe that one of the governor's executive orders did deal with freezing evictions. And wonder, I'm not sure if that was for 3 months. Maybe you guys can let us know if that's something that's expired or if it's there's any thought of it being extended.
It's planning on expiring, being on ending. So that's something that we would have to extend. The governor's executive order ends in September. So,
Okay.
So we'll have to decide, I mean, which, you know, I think by and large, the governor's done a good job. You know, it's not a natural way of things operating, right? Of having one person making that many decisions. So, and the benefit of, I think, having that ending is that our constituents, everybody who's listening to this, your voice is going to only be augmented when it comes back to the legislature and we restore that kind of balance. So we hear, like Chuck, to your point about the evictions, that a lot of business owners are very concerned about that. There's also people who are landlords who have concerns as well. I think Jillian kind of touched on that too. So we hear from all sides of it.
Great. Tammy or Jillian, do you have anything to add to that question?
I'd jump in and just say that I think this is also our role as hearing what you're all saying and then bringing that back not only to our leadership, but to our federal delegation. So certainly we can discuss, you know, extending the evictions, but I think also pushing on our federal delegation, who is doing the best they can to push on the Congress for more support. So more rental relief support, more support for small businesses, and I believe Murphy has a plan for Main Street. You know, so there are bills out there. I think we just need to push that. We're still right in the thick of this pandemic. When you talk about how do we build people's confidence, I don't have an answer. And I don't want to put it on you all, but I wonder if it is newer ways of marketing. And so when you're kind of putting out your e-blasts to those who shop at your stores, it's saying like, we have cleaning products, or like, we've cleaned this much a day. You know, we have hand sanitizer at the door, because I think just making people feel more comfortable going back into public places is complicated, and it's so personal.
I want to echo that. I think that's a really important point. I have to say, what Jillian's comment rings true to me. We love supporting the local restaurants, for instance, and but one of the issues is safety, and it's something we have to get over. It's a true concern, and it's something that prevents us from wanting to go into places, as we all know, because this is a virus that's everywhere. We don't know where it is. And recently, we went to an establishment. My husband went in to get some food, and the people cooking, he could see them, and the masks were below their noses. So he instantly said, you know what, we can't go back here. So it's really important to give not just the appearance, but people have to feel safe, and they need to see that all of these protocols are in place. And I know it's hard, they're hot, you're back there cooking, but it's really, I think, an important way to build that public trust to come back. And that's what we need, to have the public to come back in order to help to spend dollars and stimulate the local economy. So I just wanted to echo the importance of that piece.
Thank you, Tammy. Chris, do you want to add on to that, especially on the eviction portion?
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as, the chamber being able to go to, let's say, individual landlords and have any type of influence, we really don't have that. But what we do have is, the ability to put on programs like today where we can give the businesses access to the legislators and the people that can get those situations rolled up to the Capitol. I would also like to mention that we do have a very vibrant and active economic development committee, which Chuck is the chair and Kristen is also very, very involved with. And that is a place where if there is a concern from a business of something that is troubling them, getting in the way of their business, that they can come to us and we can look at it and see if it's something specifically that the chamber can take on as something we want to advocate for. So please know that that committee meets on the first Thursday of the month at 8:30 in the morning. It's open to any chamber member, and we are doing it via Zoom right now, and you can learn more about that. You can just call or email me. My email is cconway@whchamber.com.
Thanks, Chris. We have another question from Carl Slicer from besthire.com. Carl's question is, what goals are planned to make Connecticut a better business home for business to stay in Connecticut? Jillian, would you like to take a first crack at that?
Yes, sorry, the little thing popped up. Thank you for the question. I mean, I think because we're in the middle of this pandemic, that's where we need to be focused first and foremost in terms of how do we support businesses to sustain and to come out on the other side of this whole. And so that's where I am thinking, how do we get more programs like PPP? How do we get more federal dollars into the state? I also think one way to support businesses is to bring more people to Connecticut. And I'm interested to see, not that it's a silver lining, but I'm interested to see how this pandemic impacts Connecticut's real estate market as people are interested potentially in moving out of cities, and how we can really begin to market how wonderful a place Connecticut is. I know we do have our problems, but Connecticut is a great place to be and to live. And I think this pandemic has showed that when things are tough, government responds well. And we're seeing that across the country, that our rates are doing so well. So I'm hopeful that we can support the business community in making Connecticut a more desirable place to live, because I think the more people we have here, then obviously the more people are spending money who can support our businesses.
Thanks, Jillian. Tammy, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, I was just thinking, one of the things I think is a wonderful perk of that Connecticut has is our universities. We have a highly educated workforce. We have such wonderful universities from which to draw. And one of the things that we heard quite a bit about was about the pipeline programs and opportunities to have young people to have opportunities to connect with, after leaving university, with different pipeline programs or through the community college process, and start working here and staying here. And I think it's really important to keep young people excited about staying here and providing those opportunities. Some of that work was really taking place, and I think that's where a lot of our future is in our youth, in creating opportunities. I have to say, I'm excited to say I have a graduate that decided to come back. He could have lived anywhere in the country. He came back to Connecticut after graduating from college in May, and wanted to do so. I think there are a lot of wonderful opportunities here that by connecting young people and bringing that energy in, that will make a difference. I also agree that we are having a boom around the real estate piece, which I think was an unintended, we had no idea such a thing would happen. But I am hearing that the real estate market is quite hot right now. I know people who have their homes on the market and they don't stay very long. So I'm thinking more people coming in is a wonderful way to stimulate the economy as well. But we do have to be realistic that we have to work with business people. We need to know what the needs are so we can best advocate for you, because it's really important. I think we are so fortunate in West Hartford to have such amazing businesses, and hearing, especially during this time, of some of them closing is the last thing that we want to do. So I know that didn't get directly to your question, but that is what I do think will happen, will help, is having young people as a part of the process.
Thanks, Tammy. Actually, I'm going to go a little off script. Kristen, we've heard a lot of anecdotal info about homes selling quicker in West Hartford. Do you have anything to add to that? From your vantage point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most recent stats that I heard, were that in the month of June, well over 10,000 people changed their address to Connecticut from New York. So, I think there certainly has been an uptick. I think that, a lot of people who live in really dense city environments, the pandemic made them rethink. And so I think that, we certainly can capitalize on that in Connecticut. We kind of have the best of both worlds, where we have some cities, but it's not quite, as big as a New York or Boston, but we also have some really great suburban areas. So, I think that we can really draw on a lot of the amenities that we have and, the really great communities that we have in order to draw new people in. I absolutely agree that, in order to better support businesses, we need more residents. That really is what it is at the end of the day. And so, I think that the state is actively trying to work to both, recruit residents as well as recruit businesses. So when we have more people, certainly that will help for people to be able to patronize all of our businesses, which should help to be able to support them. So, I agree with a lot of what the delegation has said, that it's all about making sure that people understand that Connecticut is a really, really great place to be. And, from a previous outsider's perspective, I've been here for 6 years. It's a phenomenal place. And we really get a bad rap in the news. So, I think that during this pandemic, we've done a lot of things right. And hopefully that's a good indicator for people to have confidence in our state, and eventually that will trickle down to our businesses.
Thanks, Kristen. We have a question from Julianne Roth. Julianne writes, we know historically that bills often have many items unrelated to the main focus of the bill slipped in. Knowing that there are some hot issues that affect my industry, and those you may know, Julianne's industry is home health care, what is the best way for me to stay on top of this during the bills that have been introduced for the upcoming special session? Great question. Tammy, do you want to take a first crack at that? There you go.
Thank you. I think you are correct. That is one of the first things that I learned after getting into the legislature, that there are a lot of things that definitely end up in a bill. And it's an ongoing process, is a part of the reason that happens, that sometimes we see the bill and some of the things are put in very close to the time in which we take the vote. However, what I would recommend is staying in touch really with us. Make sure that you contact us and get updates on where the bill is. Track the bill, which you can do on the CGA website. I think those are ways to kind of stay in touch with what's happening with the legislation. That's really, to me, the best way to really kind of see what is going on with that particular legislation. I don't know if Jillian or Derek have more to add around that.
Yeah, Derek, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and hi, Julianne. Hope you're doing well, you and Frank. I love how we're a small, kind of tight-knit community, so we all know each other, and those relationships that Julianne has fostered, I think, are really important. I mean, to Tammy's point, it's like having those relationships with your legislators. I know we all get back to people right away, whether it be email or phone calls. I do think, just to kind of build on what Tammy was saying, that the process is important, and maybe now more than ever, and that we do need to make sure, even as we're doing, public forums and Zooms, and we're doing a lot of virtual communicating, that transparency, isn't lost. Like the more transparent government is, the better. It's your government, not ours. And that, so it is very frustrating. And I know exactly kind of what she's talking about in particular, this one instance, when these things happen, when it's, the process feels like it hasn't been as transparent as it should be. So I think we need to be really vigilant to make sure that it is transparent, and that, there are public hearings, as an example, for every piece of legislation that's getting proposed now, and that people have an opportunity to come out and actually see it in action, whether it's on Zoom or not, and keep the relationships. And I know Julian will, but others who are listening too, give us a call, send us an email, and we'll do what we can to help.
Great. Thanks, Derek. Jillian, anything to add?
Nope, I think they said it all. I agree with what they said. That's what we're here for, and it does fall to us. So we'll be reading those bills very carefully, which we're being told we'll get. Tammy and I have a House Democratic caucus today, and so we'll get more information. But ideally, we'll have those bills by the end of the week or early next week to prep for the session.
Great. Thanks, Jillian. Chris, I saw that you said you could chime in on this. Are you talking about the next question that we have?
No, it was just the people moving to Connecticut thing. I
Okay.
just wanted to, first of all, thank you, Kristen, for that statistic about people moving from New York. But certainly the Chamber of Commerce, once people are thinking of relocating, is one of the first places they will call. And I have gotten more requests for maps, information about towns, connections to real estate agents, in the last 4 months than I did in the previous year and a half. So there certainly is activity, and people are coming to Connecticut, and it's not just from New York. Some of the places where people had fled to, South Carolina, we're getting people from there, and Ohio, and this is almost a daily thing now. So I just wanted to echo what everybody else had said.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Next question. I don't know who. Oh, it's from Irina Lander from A Touch of Bliss Organic Spa. Her question is, as a spa owner, I have a question, and I'll try to make it as short as possible. I completely agree with the governor's decision not to open bars at this point. However, he made removal of the mask during personal services a part of phase 3, which is postponed indefinitely. Number 1, the level of disinfection and control over the environment at a spa is not even close to bars and is much higher. 2, how come that small spas in Connecticut are not allowed to do facials? For example, hydrofacial, but medical spas are doing them. We pay taxes, create jobs, and help well-being of our guests. My question is, why are small businesses like spas treated in this unfair way? And can mask be allowed to remove during personal services? That's a very specific question. Do we have it? Tammy, I see you. Just unmute yourself.
Hi. I was curious about this. I saw this question came through, and I checked into this because I didn't understand. It was a very good question. What I was told is that med spas are seen as different than regular spas because they also offer medical services. And so they were seen as an essential business, whereas the other spas were seen as more like personal services, and that would not fall under the same category as an essential business. I think, that I know as a spa owner, that would be hard to hear, but that is what I was told. One of the other things I wanted to mention, though, in that same conversation, when I was trying to understand that, we are taking information. So if there is a committee, a reopen committee, that is a collaboration between David Lehman, who is from the Department of Economic Development, and Deidre Gifford, who's from the Department of Public Health. And they have a rules committee, and they take information in that creates rules around this reopening process. So please forward ideas and suggestions so that we can pass those along, because that is changing all the time. It's very dynamic. And sometimes things happen that aren't necessarily given full consideration. I did speak to someone in that office, though, of the DECD to ask this question, and that was the response that I received.
Thank you, Tammy. Derek or Jillian, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just jump in and say I agree with Tammy. If you can send us follow-up information, I guess my clarifying question is, are you saying that you still would be wearing the mask, but the customer wouldn't wear the mask, that they could get the facial? And that seems completely reasonable to me. And so that's something I'd be happy to relay up to the governor's office and see if that can be the recommendation. So just clarifying would be great.
Great. Derek, anything from you?
No, I think they did a great job.
Great.
Addressing it, and like I said, I'm happy to email or contact the governor's office and ask for clarification. But it's great that Tammy already did some of that research for us. So thank you, Tammy.
Super. Next, we have a question from our friend Tracy Flater, the executive director of the Playhouse and Park. She writes, several concerns to keep in mind. I don't need answers, just hoping you can advocate for us. I represent a business that cannot open, and at this time is looking more and more like we will not open before January at the earliest. This means at least 8 months of shutdown. We have been incredibly smart in stretching our PPP and EIDL dollars, but these funds will not get us to December. We have been creative with our fundraising and programming, but without earned revenue, it's not enough. There needs to be more relief for arts orgs that cannot open. Remaining closed, this also means a majority of my staff will remain furloughed for the unforeseeable future. With the stimulus ending, their employment checks will no longer provide a livable wage. Also, I am concerned about our line item, the state budget. We have been disqualified from a majority of the emergency grants to the state because we received this money. It would be a shame if we lose our line item due to budget cuts. I think, and thank you, Tracy, for that question. The arts and culture institutions, not only in West Hartford but throughout the state of Connecticut, throughout the country, really are suffering greatly because of this, because of the coronavirus. And here in West Hartford, that we're actually trying to work to advocate on their behalf. Jillian, I think you are next up. Would you like to address this question? And before we do, I want to thank Jillian, Derek, and Tammy. They have spent time with the arts and culture organizations here in West Hartford, brainstorming with them. They've been very responsive, and we really appreciate your help. Jillian?
Sure. Thank you, Chuck. And thank you, Tracy. And yeah, I'd say that call we had with you all was really helpful. And I've shared it quite a bit with many people, what I learned, hearing from Tracy that it just financially wouldn't be viable to reopen based on the recommendations because the audience size would be so small that it wouldn't pay for the rights to the play. It just, to actually get to understand the barriers is really helpful for when we go to make the case as to why support is needed. So those of us in the delegation have made a recommendation to the governor's office. And then as you saw, there was a grant. It's not nearly enough, but there was some relief put out there. I think this is another piece where I'm happy to and interested in going to our federal delegation and saying when they do a federal push, we need to prioritize the arts. And to hear this too, Tracy, is so helpful that to really hear your timeline and to know that those staff will continue to be furloughed and yet their unemployment's going to run out. I mean, those are the things that really help us make the case.
Thank you, Jillian. Tammy?
I really just echo what Jillian said. I think this helps me a lot to understand really what the timeline looks like and what this feels like. And I have to say, I see Playhouse and Park, and I know so many other organizations as well, really trying to be as creative as possible. I know you're doing some work out at in Farmington coming up, and that's an opportunity to get some programming moving forward. But this is so hard to watch, and I know Derek has spoken about this art stimulation work that he would like to look at So in addition to what Jillian says, I'd really like to defer to Derek because he has been giving this quite a bit of a thought. And Derek, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think that you'd have a great response right now.
Thanks, Tammy. Yeah, and thanks, Chuck. I mean, Chuck convened the delegation and Tracy and others within the arts and cultural community a month or two ago to start talking about this. And I've continued to hear, and I'm sure Tammy and Jillian have too, from artists who are really, really suffering. And, you know, an artist, I use that in a very kind of broad term. It could be, you know, folks who are musicians or, you know, I mean, it really runs the gamut. So I think we need an art stabilization fund. I think we need something that's going to be, I would like to see it included in a September special session. The time frame that Tracy mentioned just really stresses the importance of doing this fast. I don't think we can wait for Congress. I don't really have faith that Congress is going to do what it needs to do and do it in a timely fashion. I think these are the last organizations and last nonprofits that are going to come back, right? I mean, you know, where we're going to have hundreds of people together for concerts and plays, things. And it's so important, not only for our quality of life, obviously we're missing this, but also just for the economy. So Tracy, I'll be reaching out, and you know, I'm going to be talking to my colleagues in the Senate and on the chair of the bonding committee too, to see what kind of funds we can scrape together, and then the best way to administer it too. And I know that Tammy and Jillian are going to be, you know, great on this issue too. I mean, but I really do think it is a critical need, and it's one of those things that if we're not careful can fall through the cracks. I think it's up to us to make sure that doesn't happen.
Absolutely. And I'll echo your sentiments, Derek. I mean, I chair the Economic Development Committee at the Chamber. The arts and culture institutions are a prime and very critical driver of economic development, especially in our town. All you need to do is just think about what Park Road would be like without the Playhouse. And it's not just the Playhouse, it's the Ballet Theater Company, it's West Hartford Community Theater, it's West Hartford Symphony, the Noel Webster House. There's several organizations that really add to the vitality of our community. And it's my fear that some of these organizations aren't going to make it. I think the financial need is great, and I appreciate what you're doing, Derek, in terms of trying to get the state to act, and also think that it is very important. And Jillian, I really appreciate your comments about working with our congressional delegation. It's just my opinion. I think, you know, there needs to be something specifically for arts and culture organizations. What the feds and the state did earlier was just simply not enough. It was, I think it was a very small amount of money to go around to all these groups in Connecticut. And, you know, West Hartford's not unique. You know, there are wonderful theaters, galleries, museums, historical assets all over the state. And again, they are suffering at this time. So I really appreciate the diligence that all of you have given to this issue, and will continue to do so. Several times during this call, we had mentioned about reaching out to our delegation individually. Folks, would really encourage you to do that. If you go, I wanted to give you the General Assembly's website. You can go on that site and find Derek, Tammy, Jillian, and Joe Varengia, who had a conflict this morning and couldn't join us. But that website is cga.ct.gov, and that's CGA stands for Connecticut General Assembly, .ct.gov. Let's see. I'm looking for another question. Chris or Kate, Kristen, do you guys have any other questions?
We do not have any other questions that have come in. So I've checked Facebook and also the Q&A and the chat. I think we're caught up.
All righty.
Chuck, I just have one comment to make. So, I think also listening to, our delegation and the wonderful and thoughts that they've had. And, I just want to say to the businesses that are on here and anybody who's listening, I think, going back to the how do we better support businesses, I'm not going to say for other communities what they do or don't do, but please know that between the chamber, the town, our state delegation, we are all committed. We're committed to you. We, work very tirelessly for you. Our goal is to make sure that you're supported, both businesses, residents, nonprofits, to continue in business in West Hartford. It's been really a pleasure getting to know our delegation much better over the last couple of years, and they are they're great. They're great. They listen. They're receptive. And they really try to understand every single issue that's put in front of them, and they really try and take action. So I think just to kind of say, we're all here for you, and this is a really good team, and please don't ever hesitate to reach out.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
would
Chris,
just like to add to that, Chuck. The synergy definitely exists. We're all working toward the same goal. We're just approaching it differently. Obviously, our elected officials are dealing with this at a legislative level. Kristen, with her partners at the town, works tirelessly with the mayor, town manager, and all the other entities. And the chamber is really here to provide additional resources, networking opportunities, connection opportunities, et cetera. If any of the businesses on here have any questions about how perhaps we can serve you better or additionally, please just reach out to us, and we will certainly enjoy having that conversation.
yeah, and again, I just wanted to follow up my earlier comment about their approachability. Everybody in the four of you, and Tammy had to leave earlier, and again, Joe couldn't make it, but I am very grateful that to count all four of you as my friends. I've known you all since before your days in elective office. These are good people who are doing a very difficult job, and they all have the best interests of West Hartford at heart. I would encourage you, if you have any questions or concerns, and I'm talking to the folks that have joined the call and have been asking questions, to reach out to them directly. They're extremely approachable and extremely responsive. And again, they're good people trying to do what's best for West Hartford. So with that, Christian, I will hand it over to you to give our thank yous. And again, Tammy, Jillian, and Derek, thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chris.
Great. Well, first of all, I would like to thank our panelists. Again, Senator Derek Slapp, Representatives Jillian Gilchrist and Tammy Exum. Of course, our mayor, who's just very supportive. Thank you to Kristen, who's just a great partner and ally and helps organize these as we do them. I would just add, if there's any type of programming that you would like to see, you can email the chamber or Kristen, and that's how these things come up. People ask for them, and then we try to make them happen. And I just want to also thank the rest of the chamber staff who are off camera today. Kate Cobes, who ran the program from the back end, and Jesse Bouclier, who could not be with us today, but is often minding the chat and the Q&A, so I don't envy her, as I took on that responsibility today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you all again soon. And of course, Chuck. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.